Okay, I'm going to cover priming. Priming is a very easy process, but it's only as easy as you make it. Now I'm going to be using the Lee priming tool, and I almost use this thing exclusively. The reason why I like using it instead of the one in the press is because I can actually feel the primer seep into the bullet. That way I know I'm not applying either too much pressure or not enough. You can feel the primer bottom out. I'm going to be priming some 45 brass. And they've already been deprimed. I haven't cleaned the primer pockets. It's not absolutely necessary, but it is helpful. First thing you need to do is figure out how many you're going to prime. I'm going to prime 50, but we're only going to do 10 just to give you an idea of what's going on. So you take your primers. I dump them in my hand. If I dump them in my hand instead of in here, they won't bounce out of here and all over the floor. There's always a chance you can step on one and set it off on your foot, or suck it up in the vacuum if you're doing it in your house. When you put the primers in this little tray here, it has little circles around it. And what you can do is, and what they're actually designed for, is to shake around and they right themselves up, as you can see. But for this lesson, we need to show you how to change out the small to the large primer size tray. Make sure you don't replace or swap these stems. These seating stems are small and large. If you accidentally put the small one in, you'll get little rings on your large pistol or rifle primers. That can be very dangerous. Okay. Once we get the primers oriented into the priming pan here, you will end up with a primer that's higher than the head of the case, and that will cause you a problem down the road. You can see how fast this process can go. You just tilt back and forth to keep the primers going to the ram. Sometimes you'll get a primer that feels really stiff going in, and you have to use a lot of force. A lot of times that is only due to brand new cases, and if you have military cases that have crimped primers, you have to use a special tool to get the crimp out of it, or so they say. I like using my deburring tool because that works about as well. I'm going to prime the rest of these up. I'm going to pause this for the sake of time. Okay, here's the other 40 I just dumped in here. I just shake around. I always hold on to this thing with two hands. You never know when it's going to let go. I have one that doesn't want to flip over. I just flip it over manually. Just like that. Replace the protective cover. And as you can see, the primers like to settle to the bottom, and the small priming system is a little more difficult to use, and the reason why I think it's that way is the channel is a little bit more narrow than it should be. And make sure that your shell holder is in the correct position, otherwise you get the case in and you may not get it out, and it's just kind of a pain to keep twisting it. Now, one of the things that can happen is you may push up and not have a primer in it. Now, what I do is I just shake the tool and allow the primer to roll in. And the reason why I do that is you don't want to accidentally have a primer all the way seated and try to put another primer on top of it. You will ruin the primer, and then you're going to have an odd primer out. If that happens, The other thing that may happen is you can set the primer off and get a sympathetic detonation in the pan. You can see how many primers that might be able to go off. And primers have a compound in it called lead styphenate. And lead styphenate is used in blasting caps. It's a primary explosive. Its brazency is not very high, but is powerful enough to where it can make the primer cups come apart and you have a bunch of little tiny fragments, anvils and cups flying everywhere. Okay, now the other thing, if you have 50 cases and you put 50 primers in here, you should have no primers left over. If you do have one left over, that means you skipped a case. It's very common, especially in the beginning. Even to this day, if I'm priming a bunch of cases, I'll have like 4 trays full of 45s or 9mm. And every once in a while I'll skip one. And it takes a while to figure it out. So if you really want to, what you can do is invert the case once you're done. That way you know exactly where you're at. And if I have to stop for whatever reason, like if the wife calls, says I need to go pick something up, I'll flip a case over until I know exactly where I left off. It's kind of like a bookmark. That way I'm not wondering and going, is this it? Nope. Is this it? Nope. That way I always have a good reference point. Now I'm going to get into charging the cases. And there's a couple of ways we can do this.